The courthouse hall was colder than usual that morning. The long marble floors echoed every small sound. The tapping of shoes, the nervous whispers of parents, the faint sound of a piano being tuned somewhere behind the stage. It was the day of the annual music scholarship audition, and the room was filled with young performers clutching their sheet music, eyes full of hope and anxiety. At the far end of the hall sat the man everyone feared, the judge. He was known for his sharp words and strict face, never smiling, never showing even a hint of warmth. People said he used to love music once, but no one had ever seen that side of him. For years, he had been the head of the scholarship board, and his decisions were final. Most students walked out of his auditions trembling, sometimes even in tears. Among the group that morning was a teenage girl who looked much younger than her age. Her clothes were simple, her shoes slightly worn out, and her hands clutched a folder of music so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Her mother sat quietly beside her, whispering soft words of encouragement. The girl had practiced every night for weeks, often falling asleep at the piano. Her dream was small but clear. She wanted to win this scholarship so she could study music properly, to learn from real teachers, to make her small-town family proud. When her name was called, her heart nearly stopped. She took a deep breath and stood up, trying to hide the shake in her hands. As she walked to the piano on stage, she could feel the judge's eyes on her. They were cold, distant, and heavy with judgment. She sat down slowly, placed her fingers on the keys, and looked at the sheet music she had practiced for so long. Before she could even begin, the judge spoke. His voice was deep and flat, the kind that could silence a whole room. "Name?" he asked. She told him softly. "Play," he said without looking up from his notes. She nodded and began to play the opening chords. The melody started gently, rising and falling like a calm wave. But before she could reach the second page, the judge raised his hand sharply. The sound stopped immediately. Her fingers froze mid-air. "That's enough," he said, his tone cutting through the quiet hall. "Your tempo is uneven and your dynamics are weak. You're wasting your time. And mine." The girl blinked in disbelief. She hadn't even reached the part she was most confident about. I can try again," she whispered, her voice trembling. The judge shook his head. "No need. If you're not ready in the first 30 seconds, you'll never be ready." He scribbled something on his paper and looked up only to say, "Next." Her heart sank. She wanted to speak, to ask for one more chance, but the lump in her throat wouldn't let the words out. Slowly, she stood up from the piano bench, her eyes glassy but dry. She picked up her sheet music and walked off the stage, every step heavier than the last. People in the room looked away as she passed. No one wanted to meet her eyes. No one except her mother, who stood waiting near the door. When the girl reached her, her mother's arms wrapped around her immediately. "It's okay," she whispered softly. "You did your best." But the girl couldn't speak. Her lips trembled, and she buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Behind them, the next performer was already playing, the judge's pen scratching notes on paper again. It was as if her moment had never happened. They walked out of the courthouse quietly. The cold air outside hit her face, but it felt nothing compared to the coldness she'd felt on that stage. She wanted to cry, scream, do something. But instead she just stared at her sheet music. All those nights of practice, the calloused fingers, the missed dinners, the broken keys on her old piano. It all felt meaningless now. On the bus ride home, her mother sat beside her, holding her hand. "You know," her mother said gently, "sometimes people who look the hardest from the outside are the ones who are hurting the most inside." The girl didn't really understand what she meant, but she nodded anyway. When they reached home, she went straight to the piano in the corner of their small living room. It was an old upright piano, one that had been passed down through family generations. Some keys didn't work right and the wood was chipped in places, but it was her favorite place in the world. She lifted the cover and looked at the keys for a long time. Her mother came in a few minutes later with 2 cups of tea. "You can rest, you know," she said softly. "You've done enough." But the girl shook her head. "I can't stop," she whispered. "I need to be better. I just need to understand why I wasn't good enough." Her mother smiled sadly and set the tea down. "Maybe it's not about being good enough," she said. "Maybe it's about playing what's inside you, not what's on the paper." The girl looked confused. "What do you mean?" Her mother walked over and gently touched the old piano. "Music isn't just notes," she said. "It's feeling. It's story. You have that. You just need to find your song." Later that evening, after her mother had gone to bed, the girl sat alone at the piano. The moonlight fell softly across the keys. She opened her music folder but then closed it again. For some reason, she didn't feel like playing the same song anymore. She just started pressing random keys, listening to how they sounded together. Then something unusual happened. As she reached for the lower side of the piano, her hand brushed against something wedged under the bench. She pulled it out carefully. It was an old yellowed piece of sheet music, folded and slightly torn. The title was faded, almost unreadable. There was no composer's name, no date, nothing, just a few lines of handwritten notes. Curious, she placed it on the stand and began to play. The melody was soft and slow, but it carried something she couldn't describe. Sadness, love, maybe even loss. Each note felt alive, as if it had been waiting years to be heard again. She didn't know where the music came from, but it felt strangely familiar, almost like it was meant for her. She played it over and over until she could remember every phrase by heart. The more she played, the calmer she felt. The anger and embarrassment from earlier began to fade. It was as if the song itself was speaking to her, telling her that her worth didn't depend on a judge's opinion or a score on a paper. When she finally stopped, the clock showed midnight. Her mother peeked out from the hallway, smiling sleepily. "You're still up," she said softly. The girl smiled back. "I found a new song," she said. "It's different, but I think it means something." Her mother looked at the sheet music curiously. "Where did that come from?" "I don't know," the girl said honestly. "It was under the bench. Maybe someone left it there years ago." Her mother nodded slowly. "Then maybe you were meant to find it." The girl looked down at the piano again, her fingers gently touching the keys. The sound of the mysterious melody still echoed in her mind. She didn't know what it was called or who wrote it, but it felt powerful, like it carried a story waiting to be told. She promised herself she would play it again at the next opportunity, no matter what anyone said. She didn't know that this very song, the one she had found by accident, would soon change not only her life, but also the life of the cold judge who had crushed her spirit that morning. For now, she simply played the tune once more, letting the sound fill the small room. The notes rose softly, mingling with the night air. It was quiet, but full of feeling, the kind of quiet that heals rather than hurts. Outside, the streetlights flickered, and somewhere far away, the city began to sleep. But in that little living room, something had awakened. A connection. A purpose. A song that would soon reach someone who hadn't felt alive for a very long time. And though she didn't know it yet, the next time her fingers touched those piano keys, and the next time that judge heard that song, nothing in their lives would ever be the same again. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the little living room, making the piano shine softly in the corner. The girl woke early, as she always did, and sat on the worn bench. She opened the mysterious sheet music again. She didn't know the composer's name or the story behind it, but somehow it felt as if the notes themselves were speaking to her. Each time she played, she could hear a quiet sadness and a gentle hope intertwined in the melody. She practiced slowly, carefully tracing every note with her fingers. She noticed little details she hadn't heard before, the way a soft chord could feel like a whisper, or how a long note could feel like a sigh. It was different from the pieces she had played before. Those were technical and perfect, measured to impress judges. But this song carried life. Her mother peeked into the room again, holding a plate of toast. "You're at it again," she said softly, setting the plate beside her. "I can't stop," the girl admitted, her fingers still resting on the keys. "It feels alive somehow, like it's meant to be heard." Her mother smiled, her eyes full of quiet pride. "Maybe that's exactly what you were meant to do. Not just play, but really feel it." The girl nodded, but the thought of the judge from yesterday lingered in her mind. His cold face and sharp words had cut through her heart, and for a moment she had doubted herself completely. She could still feel the sting of humiliation, the weight of everyone watching, and the sharp sound of his disapproval. She thought about giving up, about never playing in front of anyone again. But the song kept calling her back. Something about it made her feel strong, even when the world seemed harsh. Over the next few days, she spent almost every moment at the piano. She stopped worrying about the other competitions, the judges, the applause. She focused only on the song, letting it grow inside her. She discovered new rhythms she hadn't noticed before, small flourishes that made the melody richer, more personal. The more she played, the more she understood it wasn't just music. It was a story. One evening, as she played, her younger sibling wandered into the room. He listened quietly for a few minutes, eyes wide. "It's beautiful," he whispered. She smiled, surprised. "Do you like it?" He nodded. "It feels sad but happy too." She laughed softly. "Exactly. I don't know whose song it is, but it feels like it's telling a story." Her mother came in soon after, brushing her hands on her apron. "You've changed," she said. "Not just in the way you play, but the way you feel about it. You're not just practicing notes anymore, you're playing from your heart." The girl looked down at her hands. "I never knew music could feel like this," she admitted. "I used to think it was about being perfect, about making the right sound, but now it's like it's alive inside me." Days turned into weeks, and the girl continued her secret practice. She didn't tell anyone at school about the mysterious song. She didn't even take it to her music teacher. She felt it was hers alone for now, a private connection she needed to understand before sharing it with the world. Then one afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was from the scholarship committee. They had noticed something in her previous auditions, and despite the judge's cold dismissal, they invited her to perform in a special showcase for young talents in the city. Her heart leaped. This was the chance she had been waiting for, a chance to show her music without fear. But along with excitement came fear. She couldn't stop thinking about the judge. What if he was there again? What if he laughed or interrupted her like before? Her mother held her hands tightly. "You can't control how he will act," she said. "All you can do is play the music you love, the way it feels right to you." The girl nodded, though worry still lingered. She decided she would perform the mysterious song, the one she had discovered, the one that had grown inside her over these weeks. She didn't know whose song it was, and she didn't know why it felt so personal, but she knew it was the one she needed to play. When the day of the showcase arrived, she felt nervous but determined. The city hall was larger than her small-town courthouse, and the audience was filled with strangers, families, music teachers, and other students. Backstage, she held the sheet music tightly, her hands shaking slightly. She took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the silence in the hall was heavy. She looked out and saw hundreds of eyes on her. And then she saw him. The judge from the audition, the same man who had ended her rehearsal so abruptly, was sitting in the front row. His expression was as stern as ever, but something about his posture seemed different. He didn't speak or move as she began to set up. Her heart pounded. She felt a wave of fear, but then she remembered her mother's words. "Play the music you love, the way it feels right to you." She placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. The first note rang out, soft and trembling, and then the melody began to flow. She had practiced it so many times that her fingers almost moved on their own, but she let herself feel each note, each pause, each gentle rise and fall of the sound. She played not for the judges, not for the audience, but for the music itself, letting it breathe through her. As the song continued, she sensed a change in the room. The audience was silent, leaning forward, listening as if the music had wrapped around them like a warm blanket. She felt tears prick her eyes but didn't stop. Every chord, every note, every soft whisper of the melody carried her feelings. The fear, the hope, the frustration, and the quiet joy she had found in discovering this song. And then she noticed the judge. His eyes had softened. His hands, which had always been so stiff and commanding, were now folded loosely in his lap. There was something in his expression, a memory, a recognition, something that made him pause in a way she had never seen before. The girl didn't know why, but she continued playing, letting the music reach him. Each note seemed to stretch further than the hall, deeper than the air, and somehow she could feel it touching him. She didn't understand why it mattered so much, only that it felt right to play every note with everything she had. By the time she reached the last chord, the room was completely still. No one moved, no one whispered, no one even breathed too loudly. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart still racing. She opened her eyes slowly, afraid to look at the audience. The judge was staring at her, unmoving. His usual stern mask had fallen, and for the first time, she saw something human in his face. A flicker of emotion, a shadow of softness that seemed almost impossible. Her hands trembled as she realized she had not only played for herself but for someone else. Someone who had been carrying a heavy weight she could not yet understand. The applause started quietly, then grew louder, but it wasn't the applause that mattered. It was the feeling in the room, the way the music had connected people without words. The girl felt tears run down her cheeks, not from fear, not from nervousness, but from a deep, quiet relief. She had shared the song she had found, and in doing so, she had found a strength inside herself she didn't know existed. After she stepped off the stage, people came to congratulate her. Teachers praised her technique, other students smiled with admiration, and strangers hugged her lightly. But she kept thinking about the judge. She had no idea why this particular song had affected him so deeply, and she didn't know what memories it had stirred. All she knew was that something had changed in the way he looked at her. Later that evening, as she returned home, she placed the sheet music back in the piano bench. She felt exhausted but happy. She had discovered a piece of music that had not only changed her playing but had also, somehow, reached the heart of someone who had seemed unreachable. Her mother sat quietly beside her. "You played beautifully," she said. "I think you're starting to understand what music really is." The girl nodded, thinking about the judge, thinking about the mysterious song, thinking about the way it made her feel alive in a way she had never felt before. "I think this song, it was waiting for me," she whispered. Her mother smiled and squeezed her hand. "And now it's waiting for others too," she said. The girl looked at the piano, feeling a quiet anticipation. She didn't know what the future would bring or what would happen the next time she faced the judge. But one thing was certain. The music had found a way to speak when words could not, and she had learned that sometimes the most powerful performances were the ones that came straight from the heart. She sat for a long time, running her fingers over the keys, letting the notes linger in the air, and somewhere far away in her mind she felt a small, quiet hope that the song she had discovered would lead to something extraordinary, not just for her, but for someone else who needed it more than she could imagine. The next week, the girl found herself back in the city for another performance. This time it was a special showcase organized to highlight young musicians who had shown exceptional promise. The hall was larger than the previous one, with tall ceilings, bright lights, and polished wooden floors that reflected the soft chatter of the audience. She felt the familiar mix of excitement and nerves, but this time it was different. She wasn't playing for a judge to impress him. She was playing for herself, for the music, and for the feeling it gave her. Backstage, the atmosphere buzzed with activity. Students were tuning instruments, teachers whispered last-minute advice, and parents tried to calm their children's nerves. The girl clutched her sheet music tightly, her fingers brushing over the notes she had learned by heart. She took a deep breath, trying to center herself. Then she saw him. The judge from the earlier audition was sitting in the front row, his expression calm but unyielding. His presence sent a wave of anxiety through her. Memories of the cold, harsh words he had spoken came rushing back. The way he had stopped her mid-performance, the way he had said her efforts were a waste of time, it all played in her mind like a loop she could not escape. She closed her eyes for a moment and reminded herself of her mother's words. "Play the music you love, the way it feels right to you." The announcement came over the microphone, and she was called to the stage. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked out, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She could hear the quiet murmurs of the audience, the soft shuffle of programs, and then silence. She sat down at the grand piano, a beautiful instrument with gleaming black keys and polished wood. She opened her music folder, but her eyes quickly fell on the mysterious sheet music she had discovered weeks ago. It felt heavier in her hands today, almost like it carried a purpose. She didn't know why, but she felt certain this was the song she needed to play. The first note rang out. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried weight. The melody flowed gently, rising and falling with a quiet strength. She closed her eyes, letting her fingers move naturally, feeling the rhythm in her chest. She played not to impress, not to compete, but to tell the story that had been waiting inside her piano. As she continued, she noticed the judge leaning slightly forward in his seat. His hands, which had always been folded firmly in his lap, were now loosely resting on his knees. His eyes, once sharp and unapproachable, softened as the melody wrapped around the hall. There was something in his expression, a flicker of recognition, a shadow of emotion that she couldn't understand, but that made her play with even more care. The audience was quiet, completely absorbed in the music. Parents held their breath, teachers exchanged glances, and students stared wide-eyed. The song felt alive, breathing between each note, carrying a story that no words could express. Somewhere in the back of her mind, the girl felt a connection she couldn't explain. The song wasn't hers, not entirely, but it had become part of her. Every chord, every pause, every delicate whisper of sound carried her feelings, fear, hope, longing, and a quiet joy she had discovered over the past weeks. The judge's face changed again. His lips pressed together tightly and a single tear slid down his cheek. The girl didn't notice at first, too absorbed in the music. But slowly, as she reached the final sections, she felt a shift in the room. The air seemed heavier, fuller, as if the song had reached somewhere deep inside him. The final notes lingered in the hall, delicate and fragile, fading slowly like the last rays of sunlight. She lifted her hands from the keys, her heart racing. She opened her eyes and looked at the audience and then at the judge. He was still staring at her, frozen, as if the music had stopped time itself. His usual stern expression had vanished, replaced by a mixture of astonishment, grief, and something she couldn't name. It was as if the melody had awakened something long buried inside him. For a moment, the girl feared she had done something wrong. Had she played too loudly, too softly, too slowly? But then she saw the faintest hint of a smile on his face, and she realized that the music had touched him in a way words never could. The hall remained silent for several seconds, and then the audience erupted into applause. It was warm, heartfelt, and it washed over her like a wave. She stood up slowly, bowing slightly, her heart still pounding. The sound of clapping filled the room, but she kept glancing at the judge, hoping he understood what had happened. After the applause faded, the judge stood up slowly and made his way toward her. Each step was deliberate, measured, as if he were unsure how to approach. When he reached the stage, the audience fell quiet again, sensing the gravity of the moment. "You played something extraordinary," he said, his voice soft, almost trembling. "Where did you learn this piece?" The girl's hand shook slightly as she held the sheet music. I found it under my piano bench," she said quietly. "I don't know who wrote it. I just felt like I had to play it." The judge nodded, looking down at the sheet music in her hands. His lips pressed together and he took a deep breath. "This song, it belonged to someone very important to me," he said, his voice catching slightly. "No one else has played it in years. Not in front of anyone." The girl's eyes widened. I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," he said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But you played it beautifully. You made it feel alive again. You brought it back." The audience watched in stunned silence, sensing the emotion in the room. The judge, known for his harshness and cold demeanor, was visibly moved, and the girl realized the depth of what she had done. She had not only shared a song, she had reached the heart of someone who had been closed off for years. After a long moment, he looked at her with a softer expression than she had ever seen. I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Before, at your last audition, I was too harsh. I didn't understand. I judged too quickly. You have a rare gift, and you deserved a chance to show it." The girl felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear or nervousness, but from a deep, quiet relief. She had feared this man, worried his words could crush her spirit forever, but now she realized something incredible had happened. The music had done more than just touch him. It had broken through walls she had never imagined she could reach. Her mother, who had been watching from the audience, smiled proudly. She had known that her daughter's playing was special, but she hadn't expected it to move someone so deeply, someone who had seemed untouchable. The judge continued, his voice steadier now. You have an understanding of music that goes beyond technique. You feel it, and that is far more important than playing perfectly. Never lose that. The girl nodded, unable to speak, her hands still trembling. The hall remained quiet for a few moments as everyone absorbed the gravity of the situation. This was not just a performance. It was a moment of connection, of shared emotion, a reminder of why music existed in the first place. Later, when the event was over, the girl was approached by the judge once more. I want you to know something, he said gently. That song, it was my wife's favorite. She passed away many years ago, and I never thought I would hear it again. But you played it with feeling, with life. You reminded me of her. You reminded me of why music matters. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She had played this song without knowing its history, without realizing its significance. And yet, here was this man, once cold and distant, moved to tears by the music she had discovered and brought back to life. I'm glad it helped, she said softly, still holding the sheet music. I didn't know it was yours. He smiled faintly, a real human smile that reached his eyes. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it was played again, that it lives. The girl left the hall that evening with a feeling she had never experienced before. She had faced her fear, played the song from her heart, and in doing so, she had not only shared her music with the world, but had also touched someone in a way that would remain with him forever. As she walked through the city streets, the lights shimmering around her, she thought about the strange journey that had brought her here, the cold judge, the canceled audition, the lonely nights of practice, and the mysterious sheet music that had found her. Each moment had led to this, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most extraordinary results, and somewhere, she felt a quiet certainty that her music had a power far beyond notes on a page. It could heal, connect, and even awaken memories long forgotten. She didn't yet know what would come next, but she felt ready for it. She knew now that music could change lives, starting with hers. After the showcase, the girl returned home with a quiet sense of accomplishment. The streets were calm that evening, the city lights reflecting softly on the wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. She felt lighter than she had in weeks. The strange, powerful song that had captivated the audience and touched the judge's heart seemed to linger inside her, almost like it had a life of its own. She placed it carefully back in the piano bench, the corners of the paper worn from repeated practice, and sat for a long moment, letting the evening wrap around her. Her mother came in quietly, carrying a cup of tea. I could tell he was moved, she said softly. You did something incredible today. The girl nodded, her fingers still resting on the piano keys. I didn't know it would affect him like that, she admitted. I just played what I felt. That's why it mattered, her mother replied. You didn't play for applause or approval. You played for the music itself. And that's what makes it unforgettable. The next few days passed slowly. The girl continued her routine of practice and schoolwork, but a new awareness had settled over her. She noticed small things in the music, the spaces between notes, the tiny pauses that gave meaning to the melody, the way a single chord could express sadness or joy. She began experimenting with the song, exploring nuances she had never imagined before. Each time she played, she discovered something new, as if the music were responding to her. Meanwhile, the judge could not stop thinking about the performance. Back at his office, he sat quietly at his desk, staring at the legal documents in front of him without really reading them. The melody of that mysterious song echoed in his mind, each note stirring memories he had tried to bury for years. He remembered her wife, her soft laughter, the gentle way she would close her eyes while playing the piano, the evenings when the house would fill with music, warmth, and love. Those memories had been locked away, touched only by grief until now. For the first time in years, he felt something open inside him, a crack in the wall of stoicism he had built around himself. He realized that the girl, with her innocent but powerful playing, had unlocked a part of him he thought was lost forever. It was a strange mixture of gratitude, sorrow, and awe, and it left him feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The judge decided he needed to see her again, to understand how she had come across this song, and to thank her properly. He contacted the music academy that had hosted the showcase and arranged to meet the girl in a quiet private room. When he arrived, he was careful to mask the emotion that still lingered from the performance, but it was impossible to hide completely. The girl was surprised to see him. She had expected him to remain distant, perhaps even critical, but instead he offered a small, genuine smile. "Hello," he said. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." The girl shook her head. "No, it's okay. I didn't expect to see you again." He nodded, taking a seat across from her. "I wanted to talk to you about the song you played. The one from your piano bench." His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. I think it's more important than either of us realized." She looked at him, curious and slightly nervous. "I didn't know whose it was or why it felt so special," she admitted. "I just felt like I had to play it." The judge's eyes softened. "It belonged to my late wife. She used to play it every evening. I never thought anyone outside of our home would hear it. Not for years, anyway." The girl's eyes widened. "Your wife? She wrote it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, she never published her music. It was something private, something personal. I thought it would remain in the house forever. But you brought it back to life." The girl felt a mix of awe and hesitation. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't mean to. I just found it and felt like it wanted to be played." The judge smiled faintly, a tear sliding down his cheek. "That's exactly what happened. The music chose you. You played it with feeling, and in doing so you reminded me of her, of the life we shared, of the love that filled our home." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of the conversation settling over them. The girl realized how rare this connection was, how a piece of music could cross time and space, touch hearts, and heal old wounds. She had only intended to practice and perhaps share something beautiful, but it had become something far greater. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," he replied softly. "You've already said it all through your playing." The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest. For so long she had worried about approval, about being judged, about failing. But here was someone who had been more critical than anyone she had ever known, and he was telling her that she had done something extraordinary. Not because of perfection, not because of technique, but because of heart. Over the next hour, they talked quietly. He asked about her practice, her love for music, and the pieces she enjoyed playing. She told him about the nights spent discovering the mysterious song, the way it had felt alive from the first time she played it. He listened intently, asking gentle questions and sharing memories of his wife, of the times she had sat at their piano, laughing, crying, and filling their home with melody. It was a conversation neither of them had expected, yet both felt it was necessary. The girl understood the weight of the gift she had unknowingly received and shared, and the judge realized how rare it was for someone to touch a heart so closed off with innocence and honesty. When the meeting ended, he walked her to the door. "I hope you continue to play this song," he said. "Not because of me, not because of anyone else, but because it belongs to the world now, and to you." The girl nodded, holding the sheet music close. "I will," she promised. Days passed and the story of the showcase began to spread quietly. People spoke of the young girl who had played with emotion far beyond her years. But the real story, the one of the judge and the song of his late wife, remained private, known only to those two. It was a secret thread of connection, invisible but unbreakable, woven through music and memory. The girl continued her practice with renewed purpose. She explored other pieces, but she always returned to that song. It had become part of her identity as a musician, a reminder that music was not only about notes and technique, but about emotion, connection, and the ability to touch hearts. One evening, as she played, she felt a presence in the room, not physical, but emotional. It was as if the judge's quiet approval and her mother's unwavering support were both surrounding her, filling her with confidence. She realized that this song, this journey, had changed her not only as a musician, but as a person. She had learned courage, empathy, and the power of sharing something personal with others. Meanwhile, the judge found himself thinking of the girl more often than he expected. Her playing had reminded him of what he had lost, yes, but it had also reminded him of what he could feel again. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to consider the possibility of joy, of connection, and even of opening his heart to the world outside of his grief. The connection between them, though unspoken in public, became a quiet force in both of their lives. The girl's music continued to grow, reaching new audiences, while the judge began to approach life with a softer perspective, carrying her gift with him in moments when he needed it most. And through it all, the song remained central. The mysterious melody that had once been hidden under a piano bench, now alive, now shared, now powerful enough to transform two very different lives. It had started as something small, almost accidental, but it had become a bridge between loss and healing, fear and courage, the past and the present. The girl knew that one day she would play it again in front of others, perhaps even in front of larger audiences, and she knew that the judge would be there, quietly listening, silently grateful for the moment she had unknowingly given him. It was a moment that neither of them would ever forget, a moment born from innocence, dedication, and the simple, unbreakable power of music. That night, as the girl sat at her piano, she played the song slowly, deliberately, each note a message, each pause a breath, and somewhere far away in her mind, she imagined the judge listening, remembering, and feeling something he hadn't felt in years: hope, connection, and the gentle echo of love brought back to life. The next few weeks passed quietly but with a sense of purpose for the girl. She practiced each day, not because anyone was watching or expecting her to succeed, but because she felt the music inside her and wanted to explore it further. The mysterious song had become a constant companion, its melody shaping her days and thoughts. Every time she played it, she felt a connection to something larger than herself, a thread that seemed to tie the past and the present together. At school, her teachers noticed a change in her. She walked with a quiet confidence, no longer anxious before performances, no longer doubting herself. Her classmates began to look at her differently too, not out of envy but with respect. They could see that her talent was more than technical skill. It was her ability to communicate emotion, to make people feel something they couldn't put into words. One afternoon, she received an unexpected letter. It was an invitation to perform at a special charity event in the city. The letter explained that the organizers had heard about her performance at the showcase and wanted her to play at a gathering that brought together musicians and patrons of the arts. It would be a larger audience than she had ever faced before, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. Her mother sat beside her as she read the letter aloud. "This is a great opportunity," she said softly. "I know you'll do well." The girl nodded, her mind already turning to the song that had changed so much for her. "I want to play the song," she said firmly. "The one I found, it feels right." Her mother smiled, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then that's the song you should play. Play from your heart, as you always have." The day of the event arrived. The hall was magnificent, larger and more elegant than any place she had ever performed. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over the audience. Musicians from all over the region were performing, but she felt a calm focus settle over her. She knew that this was not about competing or proving herself. It was about sharing the music that lived inside her, and that had already changed the life of someone very important to her. Backstage, she spotted a familiar face in the front row. The judge was there, sitting quietly, his usual stern demeanor softened by an unreadable emotion. He had attended the showcase, yes, but this was different. He had made the effort to be present at an event where the girl would perform for many others. That alone made her heart race. When her name was called, she took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, and the audience's quiet attention settled over her like a warm blanket. She approached the piano, placed her hands on the keys, and opened the sheet music. The familiar notes stared back at her, but this time they felt even more alive. The first chord sounded gentle and steady, and the hall seemed to listen. She closed her eyes and let the melody flow naturally, her fingers moving with confidence and grace. Each note carried emotion, each pause held meaning. She was no longer just performing. She was telling a story, sharing a piece of her heart with everyone in the room. The judge watched closely, his eyes fixed on her hands and the piano. He could feel the song in a way he hadn't expected, the memories of his late wife returning in waves. Her playing was not perfect in the technical sense, and it didn't need to be. It was filled with life, with feeling, with the kind of authenticity that reached into the heart and stirred something long buried. As the song continued, The girl felt the audience's attention as a gentle current guiding her. She could sense their emotions shifting, their hearts opening, their own memories and feelings stirred by the music. Parents leaned forward, children listened with wide eyes, and even the other performers waiting backstage paused to hear her play. Then, nearing the final section, she saw the judge's face change. His eyes softened, tears forming at the corners. For a brief moment she felt the weight of the past, the coldness of the canceled rehearsal, the doubt, the fear, melt away. She realized that she had done something far beyond music. She had healed a part of someone's heart that had been closed off for years. The last note lingered in the hall, delicate and fragile, before fading into silence. The audience sat frozen for a heartbeat, and then erupted into applause. The girl lifted her hands from the keys, her heart racing, but she didn't immediately look at anyone. She had done what she had set out to do. She had played from her soul, and the music had spoken louder than any words ever could. The judge stood slowly, clapping along with the rest of the audience. But his applause was different. It was filled with something deeper, something personal. After a moment, he stepped forward and walked backstage, carefully making his way to her. "Thank you," he said quietly when he reached her, his voice catching slightly. "You've done something remarkable. More than playing a song, you've brought it to life, and in doing so, you've reminded me of love, of hope, and of what truly matters." The girl smiled, overwhelmed by the moment. I'm glad it reached you," she said softly. "I didn't know whose song it was at first. I just felt it wanted to be played." He nodded, a faint smile spreading across his face. "It did. And now it belongs to both of us and to everyone who listens and to the memory of my wife. You've made it eternal in a way I could never have imagined." That evening, the girl left the hall with a quiet sense of accomplishment and wonder. She realized that her journey with the mysterious song had changed her completely. It had taught her courage, patience, and the power of feeling over perfection. It had shown her that music was more than notes on a page. It was a bridge between hearts, a way to connect across time and space, and a force that could heal even the deepest wounds. The judge, walking beside her for a moment outside, shared a quiet thought. "You've reminded me of what it means to care, to feel, to remember. That gift is rare. You've done more than you know." The girl looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I didn't know it would make such a difference," she said. "I just played what I felt." "That's all it ever needed," he replied. Days turned into weeks, and the song continued to shape her life. She performed it in small gatherings, in classrooms, and eventually in larger concerts. Each time it touched someone's heart, reminded someone of love, loss, or hope. And each time she felt the quiet connection to the judge, to his late wife, and to the idea that music could transcend everything else in the world. The girl grew as a musician, but more importantly, she grew as a person. She learned to trust her instincts, to embrace her emotions, and to understand that true talent was measured not by technical perfection, but by the ability to move others. And the judge, once cold and distant, began to smile more often, to engage with others with warmth, and to carry a sense of hope that he had thought lost forever. One evening, many months later, she returned to the piano in her living room. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft rustle of the wind outside. She opened the sheet music, her fingers tracing the notes she had played so many times. She paused for a moment, thinking of the judge, thinking of his wife, thinking of the journey that had begun with a simple, forgotten sheet of paper, and then she played. The melody flowed effortlessly, filling the room with its gentle power. She felt every note, every pause, every rise and fall, and somewhere in the quiet of her mind, she imagined the judge listening, smiling, remembering, and feeling the music as deeply as she did. It was more than just a song. It was a connection, a bridge, a reminder of love and life and hope. It was proof that even the smallest actions, even a single performance, could change the course of lives in ways no one could predict. And as the last note faded, lingering like a soft sigh in the air, the girl smiled. She had found her voice, her courage, and her purpose. She had discovered the extraordinary power of music, not just to entertain, but to heal, to connect, and to transform. And in that quiet moment, she knew that the song would continue to live, not only in her hands but in the hearts of everyone who heard it, carrying the story forward for generations to come.